Eric Dane. Eric Dane was a TV face almost everyone recognized, even if they did not know his name right away. For many viewers, he will always be Dr. Mark McSteamy Sloan from Grey's Anatomy, the confident plastic surgeon who walks in like a storm and somehow becomes part of the show's emotional core. A newer audience later met him as Cal Jacobs on Euphoria, a character built on tension, secrets, and the feeling that a family can crack from the inside. On February 19, 2026, Dane died at the age of 53, less than a year after publicly revealing he had ALS. His diagnosis became public on April 10, 2025, when he said he was grateful to have his family with him and still wanted to keep working. The series' impact part is interesting here because it hits two very different shows in two different ways. Grey's Anatomy had written Mark Sloan out years earlier, so the change was not a plot rewrite. Instead, the show responded like a long-running institution does when one of its defining faces is gone. A deliberate on-air tribute, built as a short montage and an in-loving memory moment. Euphoria was the opposite. Dane was still active on the series, and reporting confirmed he had filmed scenes for the upcoming season before his death. That turns production into logistics and grief at the same time, because every remaining appearance suddenly becomes final. Paul Walker. Paul Walker became globally recognizable as Brian O'Connor in the Fast and Furious franchise, the undercover cop who turns into family and makes the entire series work emotionally, not just mechanically. He had other films, but Brian is the role that attached him to a whole generation of viewers and turned a street racing movie into a long-running pop culture machine. On November 30, 2013, Walker died in a car crash in California. The coroner reported he died from the combined effects of traumatic injuries and thermal injuries, and toxicology found no drugs or alcohol in his system. It was ruled an accident, and it happened while the franchise was still in motion, with production plans already set. The fallout for Furious 7 was enormous because the film was not finished. The studio paused production, then restructured the remaining scenes to give Brian a respectful exit rather than an on-screen death. To complete key moments, the team used Walker's brothers as body doubles, and extensive visual effects work for hundreds of shots. The ending became a memorial in itself, and the franchise learned a hard rule. When the real person is gone, the character stops being just a character. Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger's rise was fast, but his range is what made it stick. Some people first saw him in 10 Things I Hate About You, then took him seriously with Brokeback Mountain, and then watched him detonate the screen as the Joker in The Dark Knight. It is one of those performances that feels like a genre shift, like the moment a comic book movie stops being a comic book movie. Ledger died on January 22, 2008, in New York City. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner concluded the cause was acute intoxication from the combined effects of several prescription medications, and the manner of death was accidental. That one word, accidental, matters because it draws a clean line between what was concluded and what people later projected onto the story. The public impact was surreal. The film was already completed, so the world still got the performance, but Ledger never saw the response to it. When The Dark Knight released months later, the conversation instantly turned into two tracks at once, The Craft and The Absence. His posthumous Oscar made it feel even more final. From a storytelling perspective, it is a clean, brutal timeline. The work is finished, the role is immortalized, and the person is suddenly gone. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was not just an actor. He was a cultural reset button. He brought martial arts into mainstream cinema with a level of speed and charisma that felt almost unreal, and he changed how action looked and how leading men were allowed to move on screen. For many viewers, the anchor is Enter the Dragon, the film that turned him into a global icon. Lee died on July 20, 1973, in Hong Kong, at the age of 32. The official conclusion at the time centered on cerebral edema, swelling of the brain, and the exact trigger has been debated for decades. Some later medical discussions propose different mechanisms, but what stays constant in credible summaries is the core fact. A sudden medical collapse ended the life of someone who looked to the world like pure control. The industry impact was immediate because his most important work was still unfolding. Enter the Dragon was released shortly after his death and became a phenomenon, turning the movie into a kind of unintended farewell. Projects connected to him were reworked, repackaged, and argued over for years, which only fed the myth. But the honest angle for a script is simpler and sharper. The legend grows because the ending is abrupt, medical, and unsatisfying, and the audience keeps trying to rewrite it into something that feels explainable. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe is one of the few actors whose name became a shorthand for an entire era. She was funny, precise, and far more self-aware on camera than the stereotype suggests. Her most enduring films include Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot, and even people who have not seen the movies usually recognize the image, the voice, the idea of her. Monroe died on the evening of August 4, 1962 in Los Angeles. The coroner's conclusion listed acute barbiturate poisoning, with the verdict recorded as probable suicide. That wording is part of why her death never stops being discussed. It is official, but it still leaves room for people to argue, and the culture rushed into that room immediately. In practical terms, her death also hit productions around her. She had ongoing commitments, and the business side of Hollywood suddenly had to deal with an event that was not a scheduling problem. It was the permanent end of the most bankable face on the poster. The larger effect is what you can build a segment around. Her story became a template: stardom as pressure, privacy as illusion, medication as a quiet background presence, and then a single night that turns a living person into a permanent symbol. Michael K. Williams. Michael K. Williams is the kind of TV actor people call magnetic because the other word is dangerous, and he could be both in the same scene. He became iconic as Omar Little in The Wire, a character who walks through a world of criminals with a code that is oddly readable, even when it is frightening. Later, he expanded that presence in shows like Boardwalk Empire, but Omar is the role that turned him into a legend of modern television. Williams died in September 2021 in Brooklyn. Authorities and reporting around the case describe it as an overdose connected to fentanyl-laced heroin, and the legal aftermath included federal prosecution of dealers connected to the supply chain. It is a story that sits inside a larger epidemic, which is part of why it hit so hard. This was not a star-gone-wild narrative. It was about how lethal the environment has become. For fans, the dissonance is intense. Omar feels untouchable, like a character who cannot be erased, while the actor behind him was mortal in the most ordinary private way. For a script, that contrast is the spine. A performer who made television feel real, lost to a crisis that is also painfully real, and an audience forced to admit that the most unforgettable people can still disappear between episodes. Brittany Murphy. Brittany Murphy had a talent for playing bright, complicated people without turning them into caricatures. Many audiences first noticed her in Clueless, then watched her shift into more grounded roles like 8 Mile and more emotional leads like Uptown Girls. She had a voice and a rhythm that made her instantly recognizable, even when the role was small. Murphy died on December 20th, 2009 in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles County coroner listed the primary cause as community-acquired pneumonia, with contributing factors including iron deficiency anemia and multiple drug intoxication from prescription medications, and the manner of death was ruled accidental. It is one of those cases where the official explanation is medically specific, but the public response turns emotional and chaotic because she was so young. Her death also shows how quickly a narrative can split. On one side, there are the plain facts of illness, a weakened body, and medication complications. On the other side, there is the internet's hunger for mystery. If you treat it carefully in a video, the strongest angle is restraint. You do not need conspiracy to make it disturbing. The disturbing part is that a preventable medical spiral can look like nothing until it is suddenly everything. Robin Williams. Robin Williams was one of the most famous entertainers on the planet, but his career was never just comedy. He broke out on TV as Mork in Mork and Mindy, then became a film staple with Dead Poets Society, Mrs. Doubtfire, and Good Will Hunting, where he could pivot from rapid-fire humor to quiet gravity in a single breath. Williams died on August 11, 2014, and the coroner ruled the death a suicide. In the period after his death, his family and medical reporting brought attention to an underlying neurological disease process associated with Lewy bodies, which helped many people understand the story as more than a simple headline about sadness. It reframed the discussion toward brain disease, anxiety, and the way symptoms can change a person's inner life while the public still sees the same smile. This is not a case where a single show had to rewrite a season. The impact was bigger and stranger. It changed how audiences rewatch his work. Scenes that used to feel purely funny now have an edge because you know what comes later. For a script, the cleanest way to handle him is respect and clarity. A once-in-a-generation performer, a real medical and psychological storm behind the scenes, and a loss that forced millions of people to confront a hard idea. The brightest public light does not protect someone from private darkness. If you liked this video, hit subscribe for more like it, and let me know in the comments what you want to see next.